Okay, so today we're going to talk about George Washington Carver, and we had already talked about someone very famous with apples. Who was he?
Appleseed.
Johnny Appleseed. And hey Eric, can you tell us why Johnny Appleseed was so nice? He planted seeds for people and animals, because he cared for animals. He was so nice. Okay, so that's George Washington Carver. There's Johnny Appleseed. Hi, Johnny Appleseed. Okay. So we're going to learn about the accomplishments of George Washington Carver, and we're going to learn about the word crops. Crops are plants that are grown in large numbers for people to use. So here's a picture of George Washington Carver, and he was a man like Johnny Appleseed who became famous for his love of plants. Do you remember what Johnny Appleseed did that made him famous?
He
Planted apple seeds. Okay, he too lived many years ago, although he was not quite long ago as Johnny Appleseed. His name was George Washington Carver. He became famous throughout the United States as a botanist. A botanist is a scientist who studies plants. Ooh, that went way too far, didn't it?
That's a Carver.
Oh, there was that cotton. Okay, there he is. There he is when he's a young boy. Okay. As a child, George used his free time to explore the forest surrounding his home in Missouri. He spent many hours roaming the woods, discovering all sorts of new things. George liked to collect things that caught his eye. In this picture, he's a little bit older, right?
I think he's 12 right there.
Oh, here he is. Okay. George was especially curious about the plants growing in his garden. He wanted to study these plants further, so he pulled them out of the ground and took them back to his cabin.
No, you have to dig them under.
When he got them out, they would die. Why would the plants die when he took them out of the ground?
Because they need more water.
They need water and soil, okay? And they also need that sunlight. Excuse me, girls. Turn around, Sienna. So George moved every plant from his special garden where he looked at each and every one, waiting and caring for them while they continued to grow. As an adult, George later wrote, "I literally lived in the woods. I wanted to know every strange stone, flower, insect, bird, or beast." Sit down. During the day, I spent time in the woods alone to collect my floral beauties and put them in my little garden. All right, so there he is. He looks like a good planter, doesn't he? Fascinated by the plants in his garden, George spent hours tending, observing, and studying them. In time, he began to learn about the needs of a plant, how much water each one needed, and whether it grew best in full sunlight or some shade. George also took a special interest in caring for plants that were not growing well. He became so skillful at caring for these sick plants, people began to call him the plant doctor. That's cool.
Yeah, that's really cool.
George's passion for plants led him to develop another talent, being an artist. Of course, his favorite subjects to paint were his beloved plants. Though he did not have a proper canvas or paints, he improvised with what he found. A canvas is something you paint on, and when you improvise, you do the best with whatever you have. George made his first paints from different plant parts. He mashed bark, roots, and wild berries and used them to paint on old boards or even flat rocks. George continued to paint throughout his entire life. George was a remarkable and talented person.
He's famous, right?
I'm so sorry. He was an excellent student who learned quickly. He went on to study at college, eventually becoming an expert in botany, the study of plants. After he finished college, he became a professor at a famous university in Alabama. Now, here are some of the really fun things that George Washington was responsible for, George Washington Carver. He spent the rest of his life continuing to study plants and experiment with the ways to help them grow better. He discovered many ways to help farmers improve when they grew crops on their farms. Crops are grown in large numbers to be used by people. George encouraged farmers to grow crops other than cotton, especially peanuts. That's what he's the most famous for, peanuts. Anybody like to eat peanuts in here? No, sometimes they call them the peanut man. Especially peanuts and sweet potatoes.
Sweet potatoes is the best. No, it's not.
He found many ways to use peanuts in all types of products like dyes, oils, and makeup. And he came up with a number of recipes for foods that use peanuts. George Washington Carver is especially remembered for these discoveries. So he encouraged people to plant peanuts and sweet potatoes. So I'm going to show you something that you're going to look at again tomorrow. And this is our video.
I look funny.
Honey, you are about to be in a lot of trouble. So I want you to watch our video tomorrow about the Peanut Man, George Washington Carver.